Game over, man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. Why so serious?
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Oh, welcome to episode 631 for April 6, 2025, and I'm J.D. Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody, for an exciting show this week. There is so much to talk about with CinemaCon happening over the last week or so. We have a lot to discuss as it relates to everything that was unveiled in Las Vegas. Yeah, I'm very excited for that. We are, of course, continuing our Best Picture movie series this week as we move on to the 1966 film A Man for All Seasons, a first-time watch for myself. I don't know if that's the case for you or not, Brendan, but...
For me as well, first-time watch.
Okay, we'll get into that as well. I am very, very excited to dig into that one. We are in the back half of that series. It's hard to believe, as we are going through the 1960s.
This has been a good series. This has been a good one. I mean, outside of My Fair Lady, it's been pretty strong thus far.
Yeah, it has been pretty great, I would say. Yeah.
I mean, even a movie like Tom Jones, you and I, which we didn't fully go for, that was at least an interesting movie. So the majority of these films have been quite great.
Absolutely. I've had a glorious time going through the 1960s. It is quite stark, I think, the parallels between the 60s and what's happening in the mid-2020s.
Are you getting a little ahead of yourself when it comes to our thoughts on A Man for All Seasons?
I could perhaps be getting ahead of myself,
because I've got some thoughts.
Yeah, I do as well. It's quite crazy how 60 years later, a lot of these films hold up quite well. We'll get into A Man for All Seasons. We'll see if that continues the trend this week. We'll do that in the back half of the show. We will start with CinemaCon. Before we do that, though, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone that listens to the show, that subscribes to the show. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe. If you really want to go the extra length and support us, you can do that by becoming an InSession Film VIP. That is joining us on Patreon, patreon.com/InSession Film. You can subscribe via Apple Podcast, or you can become a member on the YouTube channel. All of that really helps out the show and gets you access to all of our bonus content and extra perks. So we do hope that people join us on the VIP level as well.
Yeah.
Okay, with that said, let's talk about CinemaCon 2025. There was a lot that was unveiled to us in the last week. Is there anything in particular? Actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and start here.
Okay.
Since last week we spent quite a lot of time talking about Marvel.
We could start there. Again, there's no way we could talk about everything that CinemaCon had to offer in a span of like 30 minutes to an hour. We just can't do it.
No, we can't. But this is an interesting addendum to last week. Obviously, on the show last week, we talked quite at length about Marvel because they had their Doomsday live stream casting announcement that we wanted to talk about. When we recorded that show, there wasn't updated information outside of the casting itself, the live stream itself, which is where Brendan and I spent most of our time talking about that, how it fits into the MCU timeline, and ultimately why I think it made a lot of sense, and it was a marketing win for the MCU. However, even later that day, as we recorded that show, and then early last week, Monday or Tuesday, there was more information trickling out. And then when they got to the Disney panel later on in the week at CinemaCon, Kevin Feige was there via Zoom to talk a little bit further about where the MCU stands. And essentially what we have found out, or at least what has been noted publicly, is that per Feige, Doomsday will be a collection of the X-Men and the Fantastic Four and the Avengers fighting against Doom. And I don't believe him. I don't believe him.
Bullshit. At this point now, every announcement that's Marvel related, think the opposite is going to happen, and that's probably what's going to happen. So now we have Halle Berry coming out and saying, "I am not in this movie." Bullshit. She probably is.
Yeah.
And
I will say there might be some credence to that, primarily because, and I'm not too surprised if this is the reality. And I look to someone like Carrie Coon as an example, right? Who did not show up for Endgame. I'm trying to recall which one it was. I think she didn't show up for Endgame after being in Infinity War because they didn't want to pay her for Endgame. And so she's like, screw you guys, I'm out of here. And Marvel has been known to do that. I don't know if it's true or not true as far as them saying you should just feel privileged to be in this film. If that's the case, would I be surprised? Absolutely not.
I wouldn't be either. Yeah.
Do not doubt the Queen, Carrie Coon. I do not doubt her.
She is so
one
great.
Iota.
You have not been watching The White Lotus, right? She is so good in season 3.
Which is to say, I look at that as an example to other actors or actresses that could be in this film. And if they don't show up, is it for a similar reason? We don't really want to pay you that much. We'll pay you to be in Doomsday, but it's not going to be what you want. You should just feel privileged to be a part of this. If that is Marvel's approach, and therefore we don't get a Storm or a Jean Grey or some other characters that make sense to be here, I could see why that would leave off some of the cast, if that makes sense.
That's kind of sad. Yeah, because then it limits the potential creative decision that could make it better.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. But it very much could come down to that. I wouldn't be surprised if that is true. But to your point, maybe Halle Berry is just misdirecting people because it's supposed to be a massive surprise in the film.
It's kind of like Andrew Garfield when he kept saying, "I never got a call." Those are his exact
flat
words.
Out lied.
Really, the only time an announcement or something came out like this that wasn't a lie was when Mark Ruffalo accidentally revealed the ending of Infinity War during an interview.
Which is one of the best press junket things to ever happen.
Don Cheadle's reaction during that, and then his subsequent interview with Jimmy Kimmel about that, and just revealing, of course I didn't know he was going to do that. It's quite amazing. I'm so glad that happened.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Love Mark Ruffalo. He's the best. So it just wouldn't surprise me if she is in the movie, and maybe it's a pivotal part of the movie, which is why they held off on naming her. And they've directed her to just, you know what, if you have to lie your way out of it, just flat out lie. It just wouldn't surprise me if she takes that approach to it. However, the way that I read it, like the tone of it, and it's hard to gather tone when it's written on the page, but it just had a Carrie Coon-esque vibe to me when I read it, which is why I wasn't sure.
There definitely did seem to be some monetary drama that we could infer out of it.
Yeah.
But even so, like, there could be a creative misdirect here, as this is something Marvel is known for doing. I will say, with regard to Kevin Feige's quote unquote reveal that this will be a movie of these teams coming together to fight Doctor Doom, that might be true for the first 5 to 10 minutes of the movie. I wouldn't be surprised if that's maybe the setup of
or just the last 5 minutes of the movie.
Maybe because I keep thinking of something like M. Night Shyamalan's Glass, which set itself up as this giant fight that would occur between David Dunn and the Horde, which only ended up being the first 5 to 10 minutes of the movie, and then it veered into a completely different path. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if Doomsday is following a similar trajectory.
Yeah, and that very much could be the case. I could see that happening where they start off by fighting him, and then through his puppeteering, as we talked about last week,
they realize what's at stake then.
Yeah, and he starts to plant the seeds where then they turn on each other and it becomes them fighting each other. Yeah. Either way, that's ultimately how I see that film going. I do not think for a second that it's going to be all of those superheroes against just one Doctor Doom. And no, I don't think it's going to be that simple. Yeah. Sounds super boring. Yeah. I just don't think that's how it's going to be at all, especially knowing all of the context of Secret Wars that we talked about last week, which I don't want to regurgitate here. You can go and listen. We go pretty in depth and get quite nerdy about Secret Wars last week on the show, if you want to hear us talk further about that. But
we don't do that very often. It was kind of fun to do that for a change.
It was fun. No, it was a lot of fun. So I do think that Feige's words are meant to misdirect. I don't think for a second that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm with you. So with you on that.
Just wanted to touch on that because I thought it was an interesting little caveat that he gave to us over the last week. As far as Fantastic Four, that, there wasn't anything particularly revealing other than we find out that Sue is pregnant. That is confirmed. There were a lot of people talking about how she looks really pregnant in the trailer. Maybe they're trying to hide it. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, she really is pregnant. People were right about that.
Yeah, they were right about
Good
that.
Call.
Yeah, which is an interesting choice. But yeah, we didn't really get much that's new around Fantastic Four. We got a new poster, but there was some new footage that only those at CinemaCon were able to see. So in some of these cases, when we talk about this CinemaCon wrap up and things that maybe excited us or even didn't excite us, some of this is built on the fact that we're outsiders looking in, that we haven't actually seen all of these things. But with regard to Fantastic Four, there's not much new that you and I specifically can report on other than what we hear is going on with the movie. And this is apparently a new update with Sue Storm being pregnant. Pretty interesting choice. But I did hear that given the footage that they saw, people were pretty excited to see this specific iteration of Silver Surfer, played by Julie Garner. So I heard some pretty positive buzz around that, which we didn't get a chance to see yet. But yeah, some new updates here for sure.
Yeah. And the Sue being pregnant thing, we didn't really talk about this last week because I didn't really have any sort of inclination that the MCU version of Secret Wars would include this. And I'm still not sure. It depends on how they play with the timeline, if this is actually going to be a thing or not. But in the comics, if I'm not mistaken, again, it's been a while since I've read the Secret Wars comics. But Sue Storm's child, I'm fairly certain has a big part of Secret Wars. So if the timeline, because this is set in the 1960s, so the timeline actually, now that I'm saying it out loud, might actually work out quite well, where if it's the 1960s in their universe, it's about to be destroyed. Their universe will be destroyed, but they somehow make it to another universe. She has the baby. The baby then grows to become who he is, and then we'll have a play in Secret Wars as we see in the comics. I could very much see that happening.
Yeah,
so
because that
makes a lot of sense, actually.
Franklin Richards, right? Who apparently is, and I'm looking it up here, trying to recall my own history with this, this comic narrative, which I don't have quite the connection that you do. But apparently Franklin Richards is some type of reality warper of sorts.
Yeah.
Which I could see playing a part in the overarching multiversal saga that then leads into Secret Wars. I can see that certainly playing a part.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I don't think that character has been cast. Maybe that's one of the hidden gems of these movies.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's revealed in a post-credit stinger at the end of Fantastic Four. I don't know.
Or if we get another one of those chair reveals for Doomsday, which I'm sure they're probably going to do again.
I still think they're going to do that. Yeah, I still think they're going to do that.
What they're going to have to do then is, because we got a list of names where we can pretty much infer who all of them are playing, because they've all played previous Marvel characters before, whether it be in the Fox universe or the MCU. For this next one, we'll probably start to get names of people we obviously know, but haven't been in any iteration of this before, which then leads us to speculate who the hell are they playing.
Yeah.
And that'll certainly help with the marketing of this. So we're probably going to get some things like that, and maybe this is one of the characters that could be in contention for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do think I think Franklin Richards or a Storm, Jean Grey, whether it's revealed to us via a live stream, some of it might just be saved for the movie. And Franklin Richards could be that, because I'm fairly certain he has a significant role as far as Secret Wars is concerned. So I would not be surprised if he's one of those things that they just save for the movie and is a huge part of Doomsday.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
her being pregnant, I thought was an interesting little reveal to us. Even though we all joked about it, it might end up being a pretty pivotal part of that movie, or at least leading into Doomsday, which I do think is quite fascinating. So I am looking forward to seeing Fantastic Four and how this pivot. I mean, we've talked about how there is so much stakes to the MCU with this movie. So
I hope it's good. I hope it's good.
I hope it's really good as well. We shall see. So that is Marvel. I don't think there was anything else Marvel related.
Well, Spider-Man Brand New Day. Did we talk about that at all last week?
You know what? You are right. I think I'm somewhat confusing our own timeline here, because you and I talked about it offline, but I do think it came out after we did the show last week. I don't think we talked about
it. Was in very close succession of when we did that show, or at least when we recorded that show, and then this news dropping. Yeah,
we talked about Spider-Man 4 and how it could play into Doomsday and Secret Wars. We didn't know the title though.
Yeah.
That was revealed after we did the show last week. But we were like, is it going to be cosmic again? Spider-Man is a huge part of Secret Wars.
Yeah.
Surely he's going to have something to do with Doomsday and in the Secret Wars, but they've also teased that it's supposed to be this new iteration of Spider-Man, that he's going to be the street level superhero that we know and love. How are they going to bridge that gap? Because the movie comes out in between Doomsday and Secret Wars. That was a lot of the discussion last week. Yeah. And then we find out that the title is Brand New Day, which, if you've read that comic, makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense that they would title it Brand New Day, because that comic is a sequel to a run where Spider-Man, it's somewhat similar, except he makes a deal with Mephisto to save Aunt May, but the aftermath of his deal with Mephisto is that nobody knows who Peter Parker is, or they don't know who Spider-Man is anymore. So it's a very similar thing.
And I think some of that came off the heels of his identity reveal in Civil War, the comic run of Civil War specifically.
Yes, exactly.
So this does make sense for that portion of the story, at least, to follow the events of No Way Home, which to me kind of suggests that for much of Brand New Day, this movie, we might actually be getting a bit of a street level movie for much of it, which I wanted. I've always wanted that. And even though it's bridging the gap between Doomsday and Secret Wars, I kind of like that it's probably going to be something that is smaller in scale when compared to the bigness of those movies, that they don't necessarily have to interlock in grandness, if you will. So I like that change of pace if that is ultimately what they're going for.
I agree. I think what we talked about last week, given that they're going to somewhat follow the Brand New Day storyline, I would infer that for the majority of that movie, it'll play out as its own film separate from the Avengers.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the film, there's going to be some sort of signifier that something larger is at play, and he's going to end up becoming involved with Secret Wars and Doomsday, with whatever is revealed to him at the end of that film. So it'll probably try to have its cake and eat it too. We'll see if the film is able to do that. But I do think based off of that reveal, Brand New Day, that's probably what they're going to do. So I do think what we theorized last week is probably going to come to fruition in some way, shape, or form.
Weirdly, the thing that excites me the most about this movie, which really means nothing to the movie itself, the title is, sure, the title's fine. It makes sense for not just the comic connectivity, but also having a title like that following, this home titling sequence that they had for this previous trilogy of films. So to call it Brand New Day feels very fitting just to follow that run of movies. The thing that weirdly excites me the most is the logo they chose for it, which feels more in keeping with the classic Spider-Man ethos that we grew up with, that we love from the comics and also the cartoon as well. So it feels like it's capturing the singularity of Spider-Man just by choosing that simple logo that they went for. There's something weirdly nostalgic about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it looks great. I'm very, very excited for that film. I really, really hope it sticks the landing. I like Destin Daniel Cretton as a filmmaker. I like Shang-Chi. Mm-hmm.
Shang-Chi was quite good. So his first time working within the Marvel system, I wouldn't say he made a Cretton film per se, but it was a good movie. It was a good Marvel movie for sure.
For sure. Very much looking forward to that. I do want to move on from Marvel. Again, not that we're going to get to all of this, but I do want to talk about a few other things.
Yeah.
I want to note that James Cameron looks to be doing amazing James Cameron things. Avatar, Fire and Ash looks quite spectacular. And the first thing that came to mind for me with Avatar, Fire and Ash, who also revealed a new logo, by the way, which I really liked. It reminded me of our conversation about Hans Zimmer and his theme for Pirates of the Caribbean. We've talked about this before, but for any new listeners out there, and you probably know this, I love this. I think this is a massive compliment to Hans Zimmer.
Yeah.
Hans Zimmer noticed that there was a cue in his score for Gladiator. It is ultimately a small piece of a much larger score, obviously.
Sure.
But that one element of the score was so good that he's like, I have to take it. I have to use this element. I'm going to throw it into another movie. And not only does he throw it into another movie, it essentially becomes an iconic theme for the whole franchise. So it became an even more epic score in total. And I love that Hans Zimmer was so brazen and so confident and just knew that series of cues was too good to just leave in Gladiator. I love that about Hans Zimmer. I use that to say this. I love that James Cameron is like Avatar, The Last Airbender, the world building there is so cool. I'm just going to take it. I don't care. Like he's just equally brazen about it.
This is basically the most expansive version of The Last Airbender.
Yeah, and maybe that's why he called his film Avatar 2. I don't know, but I find the parallels hilarious. Obviously, Fire and Ash is going to include what seems to be called the Ash Raider people. That's how people were describing them on social media anyway, the Ash Raiders. But they were also talking about how there were clips being shown about Jake Sully's children meeting the Wind Traders. So we've already seen the forest element. We've seen the water element. We're going to get the fire in this film. And I guess also wind. We're just getting all of it. Like it's just full on The Last Airbender lore.
I mean, there's going to be 5 Avatar movies, so there's 4 sequels to the first one. I maybe each of those 4 sequels are going to be surrounding that particular new element, right? So now we've had The Way of Water. Now we have Fire and Ash. So what's next?
The next one has to focus on the Wind Traders. Yeah, it's going to have to focus on the Wind Traders.
Yeah, wind and air. And then maybe we'll get back to the forest and land as sort of like a cap off that brings it all full circle once again.
Yeah. Crazy. I love it. I love that he's being full on brazen about it. And it's James Cameron, so I know he's gonna nail it.
Apparently, what's his name? The whale.
The whale's coming back.
Coming back. Yep. The whale's coming back.
Love that the whale is coming back. That got a lot of people excited, including me as well.
Best character in The Way of Water, facetiously, but also kind of seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone was talking about how breathtaking it looks. You know, that the CGI is impressive. It looks great. And I think we all assume that to one degree or another. My takeaway from all of this was that James Cameron said that it was going to be emotionally more hefty than the last film, that the stakes are raised even higher. I do not know how that is even possible, given what Way of the Water was. He nearly killed me with that film. I don't know if he can go any further.
Well, what's interesting about that too, and this is something we talked about when we reviewed The Way of Water, is how much of an emotional connection that film builds with us specifically when compared to how much that first Avatar film just did not. I mean, like it's like I'm not going to sit here and say that The Way of Water is one of the best sequels ever made. I don't think it's quite in that level. But as far as the disparity in quality between its first film and the sequel, it's one of the biggest improvements I think I've ever seen as far as quality increasing of any sequel.
Oh
I
my
think.
gosh, yeah.
Like it's honestly quite astounding at how much he changed the emotional connection that we had with this series in just one movie.
Yeah.
So if anything, it's just going to keep going up, I guess.
I know and it's so impressive that when I went back to see the first film, because when that film came out, I saw it a couple of times in theaters, and then my son wanted to revisit the original as well.
Right.
And I still don't think it's great by any means, but I do feel more connected to it because I think The Way of Water has connected me to these characters in a way I never foresaw coming.
You know what's to come. Yeah,
I'm
with
to come.
You.
Exactly.
I did appreciate that first Avatar a little bit more, just given what follows. It is still perhaps my least favorite James Cameron film that doesn't include the words Piranha 2 in the title.
Sure.
That barely counts. He only directed like a quarter of that movie or something like that. But even so, that first Avatar, I still think is the worst thing narratively that he has ever made. But I do appreciate it more, just given that it does work as a great introductory piece for what the real story ends up being. So if anything, I kind of see it now as, I mean, we'll see how the rest of these films play out when it becomes a 5-film arc, but I almost see that first Avatar as just a nearly 3-hour prologue in many ways.
Yeah, that's especially when we're going to have 5 of them in total, as you noted. There's several more sequels on the way. And if they're able to maintain the same quality as The Way of Water, then yeah, I think that first film we'll just be able to look at as that prologue. And it might not be as good as the sequels, but because we love these characters and this family, it's something we can still feel connected to in some sort of way. And that's ultimately how I do feel about that first Avatar right now. And I'm very, very excited for Fire and Ash. On the notion of Avatar, though, this went a little bit under the radar, but I am really excited about the animated sequel to The Last Airbender, which was also announced.
Oh, yeah.
The Legend of Aang, The Last Airbender. It's going to be an animated film coming out in, I think at the beginning of next year is its release date, if I'm not mistaken. And I love that original series. I think it is really, really great. And this is a direct sequel, but the characters are going to be in their young adult years. So it is several years removed, apparently, from where the end of that series ended. And it looks great. And it also includes new voices from Dave Bautista, Stephen Yeun, who else? Eric Nam, and a few others as well. So really looking forward to whatever that's going to be.
Isn't there also going to be a new sequel series as well? I think it's called Avatar 7 Havens or something like that. I believe it's supposed to be set after the events of The Legend of Korra. I think I heard something like that in addition to this sequel called The Legend of Aang. I'm not really sure. You're more tied to this series than I am, but I think I heard both things happening. Maybe that one announcement of a sequel series, maybe that predated CinemaCon, so maybe that was something that got kind of buried under the radar given the new announcements that we're working with now. But I think they have a couple things coming out, not just this animated sequel. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, the animated sequel I'm excited for in particular because it is going to be about the main cast from the original series once again.
Sure.
So it's a direct tie-in to that. So I'm very excited for that. The avatars that were announced at CinemaCon, that was really great. Really did like that a lot.
This is like the multiversal thing of Avatar. James Cameron is his own version of Avatar, but it's still somehow weirdly tied to the franchise.
Exactly. And I love that he's stealing the lore from The Last Airbender. Just no qualms about it.
All of a sudden, Dr. Doom shows up and ties the universes together at the end of the 5th Avatar movie.
So funny. Circling back to Disney, this is a little bit of a cheat because I have to talk about the trailer to Tron Ares, which came out after The
It was
CinemaCon.
it was still a CinemaCon thing that was announced because I think that trailer played for them. This is just one of the things that got revealed to us earlier than some of the other updates that we're waiting to see from CinemaCon.
Yeah. Now, to give context as to how I feel about any of this, I do want to point back to that story I told a few weeks ago when we came back from Disney celebrating my youngest birthday. And I told this somewhat embarrassing story when we went on the Tron ride at Magic Kingdom. I was with my oldest Sam, and there's something so exciting about that ride in and of itself. It is really cool. I can't really explain it or articulate it in a way that does it justice. All I can do is urge people to spend their life savings, apparently, because the economy sucks and it costs $1 billion to go to Disney now.
Just spend all your hard-earned money to go to Disney just to ride the Tron ride.
God damn it. I hate that that's the case, but if you do have the opportunity to take a vacation and to go to Disney and get on this ride, I highly encourage it because it really is cool. It is so fantastic. They did a great job with it. And there's something about walking through there, the aesthetics of it all. You get on the ride, that Daft Punk score, is playing throughout. And you get on the ride and it just takes off and it is incredible. It's so good. And you couple that, I was with my son who was like seeing his smile on his face and just the cinema of it all, because I really love Tron Legacy. I'm a defender of Tron Legacy.
I think that movie's getting a slight reevaluation with time.
It is getting reevaluated, and I do think it is quite good.
It's not a traditional blockbuster. I mean, even if it narratively has some like I guess like there is a bit of a tropiness to some of the story beats that it has, but visually it's on another level. It's a very intriguing movie, and I think we're at a point we have to start giving Joseph Kosinski a little bit more credit for crafting some pretty interesting movies. Even Oblivion, the Tom Cruise movie that he did, not a great movie narratively, but it has some really interesting things in it.
I agree, and I really like Legacy a lot. I have come around on that film quite a bit. I think it's great. So. Yeah, when I was on that ride, I was literally in tears just from all the excitement happening. Deeply embarrassing, but
not
at the
that
same
embarrassing.
time, it's just who I am. But I loved it. A special moment for me.
I'm gonna ask Sam to record your reaction while watching Tron Ares to see if you have the same tear-inducing reaction once again.
Yeah, and look again. A lot of this experience has been with Sam too, because he watches the movies with me. In fact, we just revisited the film a couple days after we got back, I think. And I think I mentioned on Twitter that there's a jump scare at the end of that film when Jeff Bridges is talking to his son and essentially saying goodbye. And as he calls out his son's name, it was such a midnight special kind of thing that I totally forgot about, where he calls out his son's name and you get cut. There's like this edit to that flashbacks to him like visualizing his son as a young boy, and I melted. Like I just completely lost it. I was like, oh my God, I totally forgot about that.
I love when you enter dad mode so hard when it comes to movies. It's hilarious.
So
it's adorable.
I love it. I can't help it. I can't help it. And,
have you seen the first Tron from 1982?
Yeah.
Has Sam seen that one as well?
I don't think so. I don't think he's seen that one.
Okay.
Maybe we watched it together. I know that I've seen it. I've actually seen it. It probably a couple of years ago. Because I went back and revisited both of them a few years ago, like maybe 2021, 22, something like that. That's kind of when I started to come around on Legacy, because it had been a decade since I had seen the film.
Sure.
And I watched it and I was like, man, this is like good. I don't know what I was like. I certainly didn't like it that much at the time, but like we've been talking about with a lot of films since the mid 2000s, though a lot of the blockbusters that were criticized then just seem to hold up quite well
because
today.
they actually look like movies.
They look like movies. Yeah. But I think Legacy, if it came out today, I think it would get really good reviews.
Legacy has a 49 on Metacritic,
which I think is insanely low.
Yeah,
I don't
because
think it's nearly that bad.
I revisited that film, and not to say that meta scores on Metacritic are often synonymous with how a film feels, but my instinct while watching Legacy again only a few years ago was like, this feels like something that would get at least a 60 something on Metacritic as opposed to a 49. And again, to your point, it's the context of when that movie came out versus the kind of content we're getting now.
That's it.
We're more forgiving of movies that actually feel and look like movies. And that's like Tron Legacy is a beautiful looking movie.
It's so gorgeous. Yeah, it's fantastic. That score is iconic. Daft Punk was perfect for that movie. Absolutely perfect. They wholly delivered. Obviously, they're not coming back for this since they split, as we talked about some weeks ago.
Which I kind of, as devastating as that might be, I like that we're getting a different vibe musically.
I agree.
With another one.
No, if you're going to replace Daft Punk in that world, there really is only one answer, and 9 Inch Nails is...
That's a great choice.
That is impressive. I was going to say casting, but acquirement, I guess.
Well, I mean, Daft Punk themselves, they were in Tron Legacy, so maybe we'll see Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross in some type of cameo in Tron Ares, so I guess we could call it casting. Speculative casting.
There you go. No, I love that they're doing this. I watched that trailer with Sam yesterday as we are recording this. That's when they dropped that trailer. And I got really giddy. I was like, Sam, come here. They just dropped this. We watched it together. We both freaked out. We both had a great time watching the trailer. And admittedly, as much as I truly, genuinely love Tron, I would be excited for this even away from the context of Sam. But there is something about watching his excitement match mine that, again, just I can't really articulate it. It's just inherent to being a parent, I guess. But like watching his smile and his joy and his giddy certainly amplified mine even more. There's no doubt about that. So yeah, we were both really excited, and it looks great. Like I think the trailer looks fantastic. That 9 Inch Nails score that is played throughout. It sounds awesome.
That's a great choice for composer, 9 Inch Nails. And I think given the fact that Tron Ares seems to be sort of from a sense of place standpoint, kind of splitting the difference between Earth and the grid, to have musical compositions by a musical act that kind of does that as well. Because Daft Punk, their music is very, I mean, it's basically technological house music. It's French house music. It's electronic music. And in some ways, 9 Inch Nails also is, but they also bring more of a earthy and organic kind of industrial rock sound to it. So there is sort of this mix between technological soundscapes with organic rock instrumentation. So I actually love that choice because it seems like the movie is visually doing the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. It looks really, really great. I'm my only, I don't want to say hesitation, my curiosity is where that film is going to go, because on one hand, it seems to be a retconning Legacy, which, okay, if you're doing that because of the initial reaction to Legacy, I do understand, but there's also been this reevaluation. I think that's also a mistake at the same time.
Sure.
I don't know if I would have retconned it, but it does seem as if that's going to go. But at the same time, by taking it from the grid into the real world, that is a continuation of Legacy. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense given the end of that film. So I'm a little confused on what the narrative is going to be, but that's, again, just a curiosity, not really a concern. I'm just more interested in how they're going to bridge that gap, I guess.
The real concern I have is the director, Joachim Ronig, who has directed movies like Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, although that was a co-directing job with his previous partner. What the heck was his name? I'm looking it up here. Espen Sandberg. Together, they made a movie called Kon-Tiki, that apparently was pretty well received. But Joachim did direct Young Woman in the Sea, which apparently did get some pretty good reviews, and Daisy Ridley was really good in it.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked that film.
Yeah. So maybe this is where they're actually starting to give him a little bit more creative freedom, because say what you will about some of these other films I mentioned that he worked with on Disney, they clearly had him probably a little bit handcuffed when it came to some of those previous movies.
Sure.
Yeah. But he usually brings a good visual sense to his movies, and this definitely doesn't seem to be any exception.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, if the quality of the film is just Young Woman in the Sea, given his resume, I'll take that. I think that'll be a win overall. Maybe a slight disappointment because my amp levels are really high. I'm super hyped for it. But given his resume, if that's all it ends up being, I will be okay with that. At the same time, I am hoping that he's able to really do his best work here. And the trailer looks fantastic. I loved it visually.
Hey, it looks like a movie. It looks like a movie.
It looks like a movie. It has the 9 Inch Nails score, which, as we just talked about, it's certainly going to add a whole different level to that film for sure. I think they nailed the trailer. Absolutely fantastic. I could not be more hyped for this movie. Totally down for it.
This is so insane. I just realized this, but the time gap between Tron Legacy and Tron Ares is almost the same time gap between the first Tron and Tron Legacy.
Okay. So how are they going to bridge that gap? I'm real curious narratively if it's a continuation or a retcon. The trailer suggests both, which I don't.
Maybe it's like a reality splitter or something like that. But it's just it's interesting to see. Yeah, it's actually been 15 years since Tron Legacy, and the time span between Tron and Tron Legacy was almost 20 years. It was like 18 years. That just goes to show how old we are.
I know. I can't believe. I know. I'm getting so old. Okay. So anyway, that's Tron. Very much looking forward to that. Is there anything else that you want to mention here? I mean, obviously there's a lot to mention, but I don't know.
There's a lot to mention. I will admit there are a lot of things that got announced that did not excite me, and maybe this is just the cynical side of me coming out that I wish never existed, but now it's starting to come out even more. I think the news that excited me the most is that Disney is pausing the Tangled live action movie indefinitely, just given the response of Snow White, which is not a CinemaCon update, but that just goes to show where my headspace is. But there are obviously some things from CinemaCon we haven't even acknowledged yet, like
it was the, sorry to cut you off, the Snow White controversy, that's what did it for you. It wasn't that these films have been bad for years now. Like, give me a break. That just shows the ignorance.
That's a hell of a scapegoat, right?
Yeah. So dumb.
Yeah.
So dumb.
Well, let's see. I have a list of things here we haven't talked about. Maybe we can acknowledge that John Wick Chapter 5 is officially happening. Keanu Reeves is coming back. There's actually going to be more coming out within the John Wickiverse, if you want to call it that.
They just won't let that franchise die. And I thought John Wick 4 ended on a beautiful, perfect note. Do we really need to bring him back from the dead? I know he's the boogeyman, but not really the boogeyman. Like,
I've seen a lot of people say this. If John Wick Chapter 5 is seriously about John Wick trying to fight his way out of hell, I will totally see that. Unless it's that.
Yeah. Okay. That is the one idea that I would totally be on board with. I know we joked about that when this was brought up, I don't know, some months ago. I know we've talked about this on the show before. Yeah. If that's what it is, okay.
Yeah.
I can do that.
I'd be down for that. But there's also more coming out within the John Wickiverse. I like that I'm calling it the Wickiverse. I think that is the official term for it now. Yeah. But we are getting a movie on Kane that Donnie Yen is apparently also directing. Yeah. Pretty interesting. I'll kind of wait to see how Ballerina plays out before I can maybe openly judge or praise them doing this whole spinoff thing. I'm weirdly not very excited about Ballerina just because I haven't really been all that impressed with Lynn Wiseman as a filmmaker up until this point. But we'll see if Ballerina surprises me. Apparently, they're also doing an animated John Wick movie that predates the canon of the 4 films we've gotten thus far.
Of course we are.
Of course we are. Yeah. So there's a lot to say about John Wick there.
And sorry, I know you're still going here. If we're gonna do a spinoff of these, like if we're just gonna do a bunch of spinoffs, why are we not getting a Halle Berry spinoff? That's the one spinoff I do want to see. And I've been on this train for years now, since John Wick 3 came out. I want a spinoff of her and those dogs. Those freaking badass dogs that were so
That's
awesome.
One of the best things about
film.
and it's interesting because John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum, weirdly the only one that has a subtitle, it might be my least favorite of the 4, but it has my favorite sequence of all the 4, and that is between John Wick or Keanu Reeves and Halle Berry and her dogs. That sequence is aces.
Gosh.
Absolutely
so
aces.
Good. I absolutely loved that sequence. I agree. That's easily one of my favorite, if not my very favorite sequences of the whole thing, of all
all 4
movies
films.
that we've seen.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
And now that we're getting a 5th movie, we're getting Ballerina, that'll total 6. I don't know if I'll see anything in the next 2 that will rival that sequence. It's incredible. So that's the one spinoff I do want to see, is that.
Yeah, and they're apparently not acknowledging it, unfortunately. But maybe they will. If these movies become successful, then maybe we'll get more opportunities for those kind of spinoffs, and that will lead its way into it. So we'll have to see on that. But what else from CinemaCon? I guess, could we talk about How to Train Your Dragon, a live action film, getting not just its reactions, the fact that it was screened at CinemaCon, but they've already announced How to Train Your Dragon 2 before this movie already came out?
Yeah, they played the film in its entirety and then announced that a sequel is on the way. And the initial reactions, it was funny because a lot of them were positive. They were, they were really praising the film, saying it has a great heartbeat to it. It's charming. It's a lot of what you love about the original film. But on the same token, none of those positive sentiments they didn't do anything to make me reevaluate my approach to that movie, because they were all saying, it's charming and fun, but it is a regurgitation of the first film.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it seems as though the praises are coming from those who actually like when these live action remakes do that. And we've talked about this many times, especially with Disney and their string of live action remakes. There seems to be 2 different audiences when it comes to these movies. Those that want to see the same thing again, and then those who don't. And you and I are part of the latter category. We like to see these remakes do some new things and reinterpret the material, because the great animated movie is always going to be there regardless of what this new thing ends up being. But it seems as though a lot of these positive reactions are coming from those that maybe belong in that former category of audience, and which that's what worries me.
I agree, totally agree. And I'm starting to think more and more, Brendan, that you and I are on an island here. And the reason I say that, not just because of those positive sentiments and how many of those critics and individuals seem to want that, or they're okay with that in these live action remakes more than you and I. But I also look at the Minecraft movie that came out over this last weekend.
Oh my gosh.
Which you and I have not seen. That film, however, has done gangbusters at the box office, and by all accounts, wonderfully panders to that audience and what they want to see. So that suggests to me that
that's a good point.
All people want is to be spoon-fed.
Yeah.
So why would the studios be incentivized to do anything else? Why would they do anything new and different and interesting and challenging? There's no reason for them to do that from a business perspective.
Money talks, right? Money talks. Jeez, yeah. Minecraft movie is on its way to maybe being $1 billion movie. That's insane.
Could be. Yeah. So like, I just don't. I hate to be cynical about this, especially when we're just talking about these live action remakes. I want them to be good. I'm not opposed to them. You know, we talked last week how, I think it was last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago now, I think, at this point. We talked about animated films we'd like to see in live action.
Yeah.
That conversation was the second time we had done that, because in 2017, we talked about animated films we'd like to see in live action. And my number 1 or number 2 film at that time was How to Train Your Dragon. I firmly believe that How to Train Your Dragon could be great in live action if done well.
Yeah.
I do not see it in the marketing for this version, though.
I don't either. I don't either. And here's the thing, though. Like, it looks like it could be a well-made movie, but I think there's a huge difference here as opposed, like, there's a huge difference of us wanting these live-action remakes to be good versus them being good because their animated counterparts were good. That's the same could be said about something like the 2019 version of The Lion King. Aside from the fact that there was an emotionless quality to the actual animation, but if you went into that movie having never seen the animated Lion King from 1994, that movie might actually be pretty moving for you.
Yeah.
But that movie did not do the work. That did not do the work. And if this live action How to Train Your Dragon is very stimulating and emotionally stimulating and gratifying in the same ways, I'm going to be critical of that because it doesn't do the heavy lifting that the animated movie already did.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it wasn't just the 2019 Lion King. I actually talked about that a little bit when we reviewed Mufasa back in December, because I do think that those original Hans Zimmer cues do so much lifting in Mufasa.
My gosh,
they are used a lot.
It's such a cheat code, but
it's such a cheat code. And look, I can't help myself. I love those cues so much, and they are tied to that original Lion King so heavily that you can't help but feel that emotion. But to your point, it's not because Mufasa's doing the work there. That's Hans Zimmer from 1994 doing the work there.
To that point, JD, you know what's going to happen when you and I go and see this new How to Train Your Dragon and the test drive sequence is fully recreated with John Powell's score once again. We are going to be at war with ourselves because we are going to be moved by it. And then we're going to question whether we were moved for the right reasons or the wrong reasons.
Yeah. I know that I'm going to have a similar reaction to How to Train Your Dragon that I did with Mufasa. 100%. When I'm in the theater and those John Powell cues hit, I will be electrified. 100%.
Yeah.
And who knows, I might even enjoy some of the imagery because they are regurgitating what is great about the animated film. So I'm sure in the theater, I will have some sort of positive experience. And perhaps that's where a lot of the sentiment coming out of CinemaCon, that's where that was coming from. Yeah. It's charming. It's great. We always love the score. We love the animation. They're doing it again, essentially. So in the moment, I'm sure there is a lot to like. I could see why people would tweet out those things. But when you get removed from it a little bit and you really start to talk about the foundations of that film and what's driving it, for sure it's going to be the animated film.
That movie is going to develop a multiple personality disorder syndrome with us because we're going to be battling two sides of us here.
Yeah. And then to do How to Train Your Dragon 2, look, for people listening, watching this, I don't know if there's anything I can say here to fully articulate how much even more of a struggle this is going to be, because Brendan and I are huge defenders, champions of that film. It is one of, if not the best animated sequel ever made. That's how far we are willing to go with that film.
Yeah, it is for me and for you as well. I know a lot of people would suggest the best animated sequel being something like Toy Story 2 or Toy Story 3.
3, yeah.
And I think those are very fair answers for that list.
Yep.
But I think How to Train Your Dragon 2 is in the same company.
100%.
Yeah.
Easily.
That is a wildly sophisticated movie. And that was coming out at a time when, when Disney Pixar was kind of in a bit of a they were kind of in a bit of a lull outside of Inside Out. That was really the only major critical hit that they had. But man, like How to Train Your Dragon 2 is better than most of Pixar's output from that decade. Outside of Inside Out, it might be the best of that entire animated output. It's on the same level as what 100%. Pixar used to be.
It is easily one of the best animated films of the 2010s.
Yeah.
Top 3, hands down. And for me, especially when we're talking about just like animated American animated films.
Yeah, we're not counting Studio Ghibli. So like The Wind Rises and The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, they're in a very different category. But if we're talking about, especially computer generated animated CGI, like that type of thing, How to Train Your Dragon 2 is up there with the best.
Yeah. I mean, and even if we are including Ghibli, Wind Rises, Kaguya, very much there at the top, but Inside Out and How to Train Your Dragon 2 are probably the two right behind those for me. So it's still top 5 at worst. But that is to say, it's one of the best animated films of the last 15 years. And it is one of the very best animated sequels. I would rival it with any other animated sequel, 100%. Yeah. So a live action version of that, I feel even more conflicted than I do about the one going to theaters in a month.
Yeah, I'm worried. And the thing that bugs me about it too is that it's coming out fairly soon. Doesn't it come out in 2027? And one of the charming things about How to Train Your Dragon and How to Train Your Dragon 2, the animated films, was that there was apparently a 5-year gap or so narratively. So Hiccup actually did age very differently. Like, he actually looks like a very different character between those two films. I don't know if that's enough time to age Hiccup in these live action films. So, I mean, again, like, maybe they're going for something different, and I'll welcome that. But it feels like a money grab at this point.
Well, of course it's a money grab. That's all these live action remakes are.
Well, we know that they are, but but when it feels like one, that's when the cynical side of us comes out.
Sure. Look, makeup in here can make up that gap.
Maybe.
So I'm okay with that. That is, I'm not to downplay your point. I just think that I have much bigger concerns given the general premise that we're dealing with here.
But there is a lot more to be concerned about.
Exactly. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying. I just think there are bigger.
There's bigger fish to fry. There are bigger dragons to catch here. Bigger dragons to ride.
Exactly. So, but look, I love Cate Blanchett. If she's going to come back, if we're going to do this and she comes back to reprise her role, that does that does bring me to the table a little bit, just because she's one of the best.
She's a talented enough actress where I can see her playing Valka in a very different way. So it's not like James Earl Jones coming back to voice Mufasa, because he's got such a distinct voice. You clearly know they're just doing the same thing again when it comes to The Lion King. I feel like bringing back someone like Cate Blanchett, there's at least room for her to bring some variety to the role.
Especially if Gerard Butler is really good in this first remake.
I've heard he is. I've heard he's actually one of the standouts from some of these reactions, but I don't know if he's a stand.
I love Gerard Butler, so
I don't know if he's a standout because he's so good at recapturing what he already did, or if he's doing something new. That's what I'm not sure about yet.
Well, and I would think to some degree it has to be new, because you're acting with another person in this instance, right? When you're doing the vocal work, most of the time you're just in the room by yourself. You're just in the booth doing the lines. Yeah. But here he has to counter an actual human being in front of him this time and other people around him. So to some degree, organically on the set, with how acting works, you would think that there's going to be some new dynamic to the role. And Gerard Butler is always great. So I have no doubt that he's one of the best elements of the new film. So if he is great and you're bringing Cate Blanchett, I mean, those are two actors that immediately will get me to the theater for sure. And man, I love that How to Train Your Dragon 2 so much. I love that film so much. I just don't know how to feel about
you know, we've been doing this for a long time when movie news starts to bring something out of us that we never wanted to have happen, and that's cynicism. Yeah, when we start getting cynical.
We were like, Brendan's first year with us was 2014. So when that film came out in 2014, Brendan was just a baby podcaster at that time. He was brand new. And we did that review here on the show. I remember it vividly, like it was yesterday. Great conversation. And here we are 10 years later talking about a remake to that movie. Like, I need time to stop, okay?
I'm sad. I'm sad.
Goodness gracious.
10 years brought a lot of pain.
It did bring a lot of pain. All right, moving on from that, people talked about Wes Anderson. There was the phonition scheme. That always looks intriguing. I know we talked about that briefly for our movie or the 2025 preview show we did it back in January.
Yeah. Anytime he has a movie coming out, I'm looking forward to it, regardless of the type of movie.
Yeah. I want to say that's going to Cannes, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it's going to make Cannes. Yeah, there's something else that's going to make Cannes as well. I forget what it was, but I think that was one of them.
Looks awesome.
You and I are big Wes Anderson fans, so I'm looking forward to that. Trying to think of what else that got revealed or shown at CinemaCon that's worth acknowledging. I know a lot of people are talking about the extended look at Superman, which is basically an extended version of that first trailer, which I like that idea. I like that we're still being kept in the dark with most of this movie, and we really just got more of a look of something we already got before. I don't necessarily love some of its tonal choices. There are things that James Gunn does that I love, and then things that he does that I feel like are kind of forced. Humor, like as far as his humor, his trademark humor is concerned, and I'm sensing a little bit of that here. So I'm not sure if I'm in love with the direction it's going just yet. But that's really all I have to say about Superman. I'll tell you what, the thing that really got me excited more than I ever would have expected, this new Naked Gun movie with Liam Neeson.
Interesting. Okay.
That I had so many doubts about this movie. That trailer made me laugh hard. It really did. And I'm someone that loves those 3 movies with Leslie Nielsen, the original Files from Police Squad. I love those movies with my dad. He was a big fan of them. So that was actually one of our first ever movie bonding moments that I can remember when I was young. So I always have a bit of a nostalgic tie to the Naked Gun movies. And this feels to be in keeping with that same comedic style in a new way. I laughed. I'm actually kind of shocked at how much I laughed at that. I thought it was really funny.
Okay. I am keeping an open mind. I didn't find it as humorous as you did, but like everyone else on the planet, I did come around on that last joke. The OJ joke at the end was really
nice way to
clever.
stick the landing. Yeah,
that was really fantastic.
There's another version of this trailer that doesn't have the OJ joke. I think it actually premiered overseas, but I did see it. Instead, the trailer capper is, I guess, Police Squad getting this self-driving car, and Liam Neeson just drives it away, but it's still tied to these chargers, and it pulls this wall down, and all these prisoners start escaping, and one of them's Hannibal Lecter for no reason. God. And Liam Neeson just watching it going like, man, this world is getting even more screwed up, isn't it? It's quite hilarious.
It could be great. Yeah, I'm certainly going to keep an open mind to it. It could be really funny. So that could end up being a really interesting surprise. On a similar note, though, as far as films that you didn't really have much interest in, and then it starts to pique your interest based off of what came out of CinemaCon. For me, that is He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. I had zero appetite for that film at all. And then people start talking about how, no, this actually looks really great. The costuming looks fantastic. It has wonderful tangibility to it. And you look who that film is directed by, and of course, it makes a lot of sense. It's one Travis Knight, who we really love here anyway. Yeah. I think Travis Knight is great. So the fact that people are like, no, this looks really good.
Well,
I have no reason to doubt him.
How about this? There's even more to this, because Travis Knight, his only directorial effort in live action was Bumblebee. I like Bumblebee quite a bit. Certainly, I mean, the argument can be made that it is the best of the Transformers universe, but that's a very, it's a interesting bar to clear, right? But here's what's really interesting about this Masters of the Universe movie is that it's not only directed by Travis Knight, it's written by Chris Butler. And guess what movies he also wrote? Paranorman, Missing Link, Kubo and the Two Strings. So we basically, what do we have? A live action Leica movie happening here?
Pretty much. Yeah,
that's kind of interesting.
They've worked together a lot before. They didn't work together on Bumblebee, but they've worked together a lot with Leica.
Yeah. Well, that's why I mentioned Bumblebee in that way, because it feels sort of like a distant thing, whereas Masters of the Universe feels like a natural trajectory for Travis Knight given that history.
Yes. Yep. It could just be a live action Leica movie. And
that's an awesome way to put it.
Okay. But it's not a remake of one of their own movies. It's not How to Train Your Dragon or anything else that we've talked in that regard.
You hear this, DreamWorks? You hear this, Disney? This is how you do it.
This is how you do it. Exactly. That is very, very exciting. It has a really good cast. So yeah, I mean, that's when I went from 0 to 100 real fast. I had no interest. And then you hear everything about it and you're like, okay, Knight, Butler, this cast.
I think
I'm on board.
I feel like this is the movie this comes out next year, or is it this year?
26.
Okay, so this comes out next year. I feel like
next summer.
This movie could potentially be the Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves of its year, where it's going to surprise
great
people.
Call. Yep, I think so. I think that's exactly where this is headed.
Yeah,
that's
I think
great
so
comp.
That's a great one to bring up. I didn't really think about that, but that is one to look forward to, just given the talent behind the camera for sure.
Yeah. So that one was a nice little surprise. I just want to mention After the Hunt, the Luca Guadagnino film. People were talking about that one. It looks interesting. It has, people were making jokes because it's called After the Hunt, and it has a very similar premise to the Mads Mikkelsen film, The Hunt, that came out in 2013, I believe. So it almost feels like a spiritual sequel to that movie.
I didn't even think about that. That's a perfect title for a sequel if they were to ever make a sequel to The Hunt.
Yeah, I know. I mean, he's not in that film, but could you imagine if he was? How crazy would that be?
Wow. That's how you please cinephiles, by making a secret sequel to a movie like The Hunt.
Exactly. Right. And I don't
forget about secret sequels to commercial movies. Let's make a secret sequel to this foreign language film.
Just these international films. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really wild. But yeah, people were talking about that one. I thought that was interesting. What else? Is there anything on here? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're supposedly getting this Trey Parker, Kendrick Lamar musical. That could be interesting. Coming from Paramount.
Yep. That just honestly, that's a very interesting pairing.
Yeah.
Apparently Disney showcased some, I guess, footage of the Bruce Springsteen biopic.
Yes.
Yeah, which I guess hearing some pretty positive things about that. We keeping to the music biopic side of things, we got confirmation that the 4 Beatles films from Sam Mendes are all coming out on the same day.
Yeah. Yeah, people loved that news, didn't they?
Didn't they reveal
first
it?
Bingeable experience in the theaters.
That's what I was.
Get out of here!
I was just going to say they're announcing it as the first bingeable experience in theaters. That does not sound like a marketing win.
No,
at least it doesn't interest me. That sounds exhausting.
That's also objectively not true, because for years now you've been able to go see all 3 Lord of the Rings back to back to back, or Harry Potter's like playing back to back. Like you hear of like these bingeable experiences, if you will. They've been doing that for a long time now.
Well,
not with new releases, but with films, trilogies, franchises that a lot of people love. You know?
I mean, okay, so is it the first bingeable experience for solely new releases? I mean, maybe so if they're trying to plan it that way, but I mean, I don't know. I guess you can qualify Barbenheimer as really the first bingeable experience that just happened by accident.
That's true. Yeah, that wasn't intentional, but that is ultimately how people did it for sure.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of the plan here, is to have their own Barbenheimer, but all with just their own movies. Good luck with that, I guess. Imagine
trying to recreate Barbenheimer with a biopic on the 4 Beatles.
Yeah.
Biopics on the 4 Beatles.
Good luck. That's all I have to say. Good luck to you.
Sam Mendes is a weird filmmaker. Yeah. He really is.
Look, and I love Sam Mendes. I don't necessarily doubt that the films will be some varying degree of good just because he is a good filmmaker. But I don't understand this. Like, I don't understand the business of it. There's no way that those 4 films collectively are going to make a lot of money. I just don't see that. Like, maybe 1 or 2 of them will do well, but all 4 of them at the same time? I don't know. Logistically, how do you, like, are the theaters going to want to use up essentially all of their theaters for just those 4 movies for the whole weekend? I just don't see that happening.
I think we got to start placing bets as to which ones will be the better moneymakers, or which ones will actually be the quote unquote better ones critically and just as far as quality.
Like people will go see the Paul McCartney one. Ringo Starr, though. How many people do you think is going to go see? I want to see that Ringo Starr biopic.
I mean, when you think of the
Come
Beatles, most
on.
people think of John Lennon and Paul McCartney first. I mean, I tend to stand by the argument that Ethan Hawke made in Boyhood, that there is no favorite Beatle. Really, it is about the collective. So maybe that's why they're trying to do this as a cinematic, bingeable experience. But of course, the Paul and John movies are going to be the ones that people, the general public, seek out first. Just
100%.
just given that, yeah.
Yeah. So why would you compete with them together? I just don't understand that move at all.
Yeah.
Makes no sense to me.
Unless the movies are about how the Beatles were at war with each other and they kind of competed with each other. They kind of did do that creatively. You know, when the Beatles, not to get too far down a rabbit hole on the music side of things, but when the Beatles were recording their 1968 album, The White Album, there are a lot of filler tracks on there of each individual Beatle just going into the studio, releasing and recording their own song and putting it on the album without the permission of the others. So they were kind of at a creative odds with each other. Maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe it's kind of a meta tactic of sorts to make a competitive experience of their own individual movies, given what they did as a band in the late 60s. So I mean, I don't know what era this is playing into as far as their lives. I don't know if it's the late 60s or if it's the entire 60s or if it's just a particular album that they're recording, or maybe it's the end of the Beatles. I don't know what they're actually doing from a time period standpoint, but I can maybe see the intent of trying to turn it into that, just given the history of how the Beatles broke up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the project in and of itself is compelling. I've talked about this before. We've talked about this before. I don't mind the idea on paper. I just don't understand the release strategy here. And I
don't see it working. I don't see it working.
Yeah, I don't see it working either. I would have, look, I'm not a movie marketer. That's not what I do. And maybe they do have a strategic plan in place. One would assume that they would. I don't see the strategy here, though. It makes no sense to me. But what do I know?
It might become clearer when we get a sense of what the intent of these movies are. Yeah, maybe we can start to devise what type. And we kind of see what the intent is. We might get a better sense of what they're doing and why they're doing it.
We do need to move on. I just want to note real quick before we leave, one more title here. The horror film, the Jordan Peele produced horror film Him, I think is interesting because we don't really see many sports horror thrillers like that. Yeah. Specifically, I feel like is something that really hasn't been mined all that much in film. So that's a fascinating idea to take football and combine it with horror and maybe something psychological like Whiplash. That's what a lot of people were describing it as, is like a horror version of Whiplash, but with football. Okay.
Has there ever been a sports horror film?
I don't know. I was trying to think one off the cuff.
I don't think there has. I mean, I know
this might be a first of its kind. I don't know.
There have potentially been sports scenes or sequences in horror films, but I don't recall there being a movie that can be defined as a sports horror genre movie. I can't think of one.
I can't think of one either. There might be one out there. I'm sure there are a bunch of B level or even lower than that.
Yeah, there are non-movie versions of this.
Where, because a lot of that underground stuff, they'll do anything. But as far as mainstream movies go, I don't know if there has been a sports horror movie before. Not one that I can think of anyway.
Yeah, I can't think of
it sounds fascinating. I'm very curious for it.
Yeah, me too.
All right, Brendan, let's talk about your pain threshold. Do you have a high pain threshold?
Not really, no. And that's primarily because I just haven't broken many bones, if any bones, in my life. I haven't really had the opportunity to experience that kind of pain, unlike you and your dislocated knees over the years.
Man, it's the worst.
I can't even fathom what that's like. I broke my pinky toe once, my little toe. That's the worst of the breakages I've ever dealt with, which basically goes to show how much Novocaine I probably would need if I were to ever have a more serious injury.
I know. I wish that I was Nathan Kane the Jack Quaid character in Novocaine, because I would be the most aggressive and probably the best beer league hockey player in South Florida. I would just go nuts if I had a pain threshold like that, where he has the inability to feel pain. Unfortunately, I am the opposite. I'll never forget the first time that I dislocated my knee. They had to take me to the ER because it was still out of socket. Ugh. And so then they had to put it in. It was the worst. But when they went to put it in, there was this little nurse to my left, and God bless her. I will never know her name. But when they went to put my knee back in, I grabbed her so hard and screamed bloody murder. Like, you would have thought that I was, 6 years old. It was the absolute worst.
Oh my gosh. My knee is throbbing right now.
It was so bad. So bad. God bless her heart. She was very comforting in that moment, but I needed it. I needed a little Novocaine to get through that experience, because it was the worst. So I do not have a high threshold for pain, but that is to say, I think that's what will be exciting about catching up with Novocaine. I have not seen the film yet.
No, but I hear it's a lot of fun.
I hear it's a lot of fun. Jack Quaid, once again, he's been in a couple movies this year already, including Novocaine leading this one. It is out on digital right now, so you can go and check that out. But if you want a free digital code, we have 5 of them to give away. We have 5 to give away. If you want one of those digital codes, you can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, probably mostly Twitter and Instagram. That's where we'll kind of put out some feelers there and some information on how you can win one of these digital codes. At InSession Film on those platforms. Be sure to follow us later on this week. Stay tuned. We will have details on how you can win one of those digital codes. And you can get some Novocaine in your life.
I think we all need it.
We all need a little Novocaine. So follow us on social media. Look out for that. And we thank Novocaine for their support. All right, Brendan, let's talk about swag, T-shirts, merchandise. We have
toys,
some fun designs for you guys at our InSession Film store. We got InSession Film inspired merch, of course, if you want to get the logo. We have one that says the InSession Film Podcast on it. We got Women in Session, Chasing the Gold merch as well. But we also have movie inspired designs up there. We have a Lester Bangs quote that I really love. We have an Arrival inspired theme. We got Stop Turning Art into Sports. There's a Midnight Special themed one as well. And recently we have a new one, and this is kind of a quote that we've always gone by.
Oh yeah,
the famous Tim Burton quote that movies are an expensive form of therapy, and so is podcasting. That has always been kind of our mantra.
Movie podcasting specifically.
Movie podcasting. So we got these new T-shirts that say "Movies are my expensive form of therapy."
Hey, it works.
Got one. It's great. I love it.
It brings joy. It brings good feelings. So if you're having a bad day, just watch a movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Pay money to watch a movie. That'll solve your issue.
You can see it on the video there.
For those watching on YouTube, you can see it. But for those listening on Spotify, we have this great new shirt that says "Movies are my expensive form of therapy," and you can find it on the store right now.
Yeah, I love how this turned out. So I did wear this to the movies last night, so I'm kind of double dipping for the show.
You're actually keeping true to your word. You're keeping true to your word.
To everybody, I love how it turned out. So it's available right now. I got the gold version, but there's also like our InSession Film green as well. If you want white, I can make that happen. Just let me know. I wasn't sure because there's lots of colors you can choose from.
Yeah,
just kind of depends on what you want. But I can make a white version if people want that. Just let me know. DM me or email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com.
We can make it work.
We can make it work. If you want to get a T-shirt, go to InSessionFilm.com/store. You'll see a bunch of designs up there. Or you can go to our TeePublic link and our TeePublic store is now through Dashery. So it's InSessionFilm.com. I keep doing this. InSessionFilm.dashery.com. Again, that's InSessionFilm.dashery.com. And if you go there, it essentially acts like our own website through TeePublic. So you can see all of our merch there. We have specific pricing on there. So I actually lowered the pricing. So it's a lower pricing tier than what you would get on TeePublic normally through the TeePublic stuff. So I've lowered the pricing. You can go check it out there. It's really great. So InSessionFilm.dashery.com. You'll see all the designs there. Click one, and you can pick from different colors, different sizes of T-shirts, and all kinds of items up there. So go check all of that out. Again, you can just go to InSessionFilm.com/store. You'll get links there as well. And we thank everyone for supporting us. We love it when you guys buy T-shirts and wear them out. So
absolutely,
if you have any design ideas, let me know. We'll work on the next one. We'll get it out there. So
we've got more on the horizon. JD's very creative with some of these shirts. He does a great job with these designs.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And all right. Well, thank you for your support, and go get yourself a fun T-shirt.
Heck yeah.
Okay. With all of that laid out, CinemaCon was fun, but we now have to turn the page. We're going to be traveling back in time. The year is 1966. The best picture winner of that year was the Fred Zinnemann film, A Man for All Seasons. It defeated Alfie, The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming, The Sand Pebbles, and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. So like of those five, I want to say the film that has aged the best in terms of the zeitgeist anyway is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. People really love, they still talk about that film a lot. These other four, maybe not as much, including A Man for All Seasons.
Yeah. Alfie, I know, did get a remake in the 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Jude Law starred in it. But that's perhaps the only, I guess, film that maybe has some type of temporary cultural sort of thing happening there. But yeah, most people would talk about Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and rightfully so. That is the other film of these five that I have seen, and I do think it is a very good film.
Yeah, for sure. I am really curious how The Russians Are Coming would play through the prism of 2025.
Just given that title.
The politics right now are so very different than 1966. So would be really curious to maybe give that one a spin. But winning out of this group, of course, was A Man for All Seasons. As we noted up at the top of the show, this was a first-time watch for both Brendan and I.
That's right.
So with all of that laid out, Brendan, are you ready to get into this one?
Let's talk about how this film is basically a mirroring of 2025.
Yeah, indeed. All right. A Man for All Seasons. It is directed by Fred Zinnemann, as we noted a moment ago. It stars Paul Scofield, Wendy Hiller, Leo McKern, Orson Welles. Yeah.
He's got
Robert
one scene,
Shaw.
and it's a very, very effective scene.
Two scenes.
Oh, that's right, two.
Mostly one. You're right.
The second scene is kind of a strange scene. It's actually kind of a funny scene.
Yeah. Robert Shaw, Susanna York, John Hurt in his first prominent role.
That was so interesting seeing him. Yeah.
Absolutely. Nigel Davenport as the Duke of Norfolk. And of course, a bunch of others that come and go throughout the film. If you're not familiar with A Man of All Seasons, it tells the story of Sir Thomas More, who stood up to King Henry VIII when the king rejected the Roman Catholic Church to obtain a divorce and remarry. Now, how does that play into 2025? Oh, you'll see. All right, Brendan, what did you think about A Man for All Seasons?
It plays into 2025 because the film I couldn't stop thinking about was Conclave.
Yeah.
And maybe just take away the election backdrop of that film and replace it with matchmaking, I guess. It does have sort of a similar aura, at least with regard to not just the politics of it all, but also the church backdrop specifically, showcasing really how a man was starting to bring a bit more of a progressive-minded sensibility to the Catholic Church. I think that's in a way kind of mirroring of Ralph Fiennes in Conclave. There are some comparisons we can make between him in that movie and Thomas More here. So I think that makes the movie incredibly fascinating to me. It's not my favorite of these Best Picture winners that we've done in the 1960s thus far, but I think it might be the most interesting. I find its subject matter really predictive, as I'm sure we'll talk about. What I think is more interesting about the film is given when it came out and the overall filmmaking of it. I want to start here before we get more into the subject matter itself, because I feel like this movie, A Man for All Seasons, kind of feels like a transitional film. It feels like it's sort of bridging the gap between the historical epics of old that we got with even some of these Best Picture winners like a Lawrence of Arabia, for instance, or even Tom Jones in some ways. So it still kind of carries that similar aura, but there's kind of a raw grittiness to it that seems to allude to the American New Wave or the New Hollywood that wouldn't really take off until 1 year later, 1967. I can kind of see this film bridging that gap a little bit. Like I see like the historical auras of these old movies, but then I see the grittiness of something like a Bonnie and Clyde, for instance, even though it doesn't take place in a contemporary time span. Like I think that's what makes the movie really, really intriguing just as a piece of filmmaking. But I'm sure we'll talk about some of its predictive politics, some of its predictive religious hypocrisies at play as well. There is a timeliness to this movie that I really did appreciate. Not my favorite of these movies we talked about in this specific 1960s series, but a very fascinating one nonetheless.
Yeah, I liked this way more than I thought I would. More than I thought it would. However, to Brendan's point, it plays really, really well in 2025 in a similar way to what we talked about last week with The Sound of Music. I don't know if this won Best Picture in 1966 for the same reasons, but this film is essentially about a man who was so committed to anti-corruption and standing up to a tyrant's manipulative schemes that he was killed for it.
Yeah.
It's about sticking to your convictions and doing the right thing no matter the cost. And again, as simple as that sounds, through a 2025 lens, it almost has a Mrs. Miniver schmaltzy, we got to go to war kind of message.
Sure. Yeah.
I was weirdly very moved by that here. But even outside of the 2025 prism, because just like we talked about last week with The Sound of Music, there will always be a tyrant to fight against. There will always be a reason to show conviction. So there is a timelessness to the film's themes, and I think that is quite effective in execution, especially when you couple it to the religious angles of the film that Brennan was talking about in his opening thoughts. The other reason I really like this film is because of its immersiveness. And I don't mean conventionally in the sense that it has great production design and period accurate costuming and world building, all things that are really great here. They are. But what's so fascinating about this film is the level of detail regarding daily life in the 1500s. In most movies, when a scene ends and a character has to travel home, there's simply an edit from one location to the other.
Yeah.
But in this film, we see Sir Thomas More, for example, at the Hampton Court having a meeting.
Yeah.
And once that meeting is done, he has to walk outside. We see him walk outside. He has to call over a boatman.
He's basically hailing a taxi in the 1500s.
Absolutely. The boatman comes over to the dock. He gets in the dock. We see all of this.
There's
unfold.
A practicality to
There's
it
a
that
practicality
is really
to it.
surprising here. You're right.
He gets into the boat. They have a small conversation. They have to travel by water through the night for Sir Thomas More to get all the way home. Something that would have taken several hours, and the film does a great job of giving you that sense of time. There are a lot of sequences in the film that are like that, that I find really captivating. It perhaps loses some of that in the final act when it becomes a courtroom drama. But generally, the film is immersive in a different way than most movies. It is in the fine detail. It is in the day-to-day life and how every character has a role to play, a very specific role to play. And they go about doing their business and living their lives within those confines. And man, I found that engrossing here, that the film would pause and take time to show us those things. And that's what differentiates this from the stage play version of it. It takes advantage of the medium of cinema in a really, really great way that, again, I think is detail oriented in a different way than a lot of period films like this. While still giving us those great aesthetics. The production design, the costuming,
it's a great
all of it
movie.
is still really great. But from a direction perspective, from a storytelling perspective, it wants to supplant you in what this time period was really like at a fundamental level. And man, I was not expecting that. And I thought it was great.
I like the way you verbalize that, because I think that's ultimately why the film felt like such a transitional film. Like I said in my opening thoughts, how it feels like it has this, it feels like it has a place in the way historical epics were constructed, even just a few years before it. But it does kind of have the grittiness and the griminess of what we'd expect from the new Hollywood that was about to surface. And I think it is the focus on the practical. This doesn't take place in modern times like movies like let's say Easy Rider or Midnight Cowboy, which we'll talk about towards the end of this series. But the filmmaking here from Fred Zinnemann does kind of carry similar tactics. There's the emphasis on that practicality, but also the smallness of things. And the fact that this film just feels like such a bridge between two different sensibilities makes it such an interesting relic in the context of this Best Picture series. I could really feel the wheels start to turn and the influences start to change with regard to how films were made at this time. And this movie is kind of a nice bridge between the two. And I like that it focuses on the mundanity. That's another reason why it kind of reminded me of Conclave in a way, because that's a movie that does kind of have a grandness to it as sort of a facade, but it does kind of have, it's really just people talking in rooms. And that's essentially what this is. For most of it, it is people talking in various rooms. It does, but it doesn't feel like obviously it does feel like it came from a stage play. This is also adapted from the same screenwriter of the stage play. So he's Robert Bolt, I believe his name is. He's also writing the adaptation here. So the language still feels like it came from a stage play like setting, but the movie doesn't move like it feels like a stage play. It doesn't carry the same stagey qualities that we tend to criticize these adaptations for. Like, it actually feels like it's well interpreted for the film medium. And I think that's great on Fred Zinnemann as a filmmaker for sure.
Absolutely. And that's where the writing and the directing here are wonderful complements to each other.
I agree.
Because it is adapted from a stage play. So there are going to be a lot of moments here where characters find themselves in these conversations. And those conversations are enlightening for sure. However, what I love about the direction of the film is that, again, it immerses us into that day-to-day, which then gives us context as to why these characters, in particular Sir Thomas More, why he reacts the way that he does. And I love that mundanity. I love that we're watching a man walk down the stairs, getting to a boat, and then float his way over hours just to deliver a letter. I love when King Henry shows up at Sir Thomas More's home. It's not just this extravagant arrival like it would normally be. No, he's got to walk through mud. And dirty himself up in order to get to this house. And that's something we've never seen before in a movie like this. Exactly. A lot of movies would just show us the elegance of the king and him walking onto the property and everyone bowing down. And of course, there is a level of that here. But I do love that it takes that extra step of showing us that at a certain point, as a human being, he has to get off that boat.
Yeah.
And it's not always clean. It's not always elegant.
Right.
Like he jumps into the mud and jokes about it and makes everyone there have a laugh. Like,
yeah,
I love that it's willing to give us those kinds of details because it gives these characters extra nuances in their personalities. And it makes the dynamic between Sir Thomas More and King Henry, it gives their conversations more complexity because the personalities really pop off the screen, which I really like. And of course, that's in Schofield's performance. It's in Robert Shaw's performance as well.
Robert Shaw's hilarious in this movie.
He's very funny. He's very charming, but he also comes off aggressive at times. So you can see why people would be intimidated by him and charmed by him.
But he's also kind of a whiny brat when he doesn't get his way. Yeah.
And that's ultimately the drama of this film. He is a whiny brat. He wants to get this divorce. He wants to get this marriage annulled so that way he can marry someone else. But there's all of these politics in his way. There are these religious customs in his way that he has to work around, and he's not getting his way. He is acting as a child here.
Yeah.
And Robert Shaw taps into that in an incredible way. It's very, very good.
Orson Welles kind of does too for the two scenes that he has. He kind of has he's not, I wouldn't say whiny in a very verbose way like Robert Shaw is, but there is definitely a scheminess to him and a sleaziness to him that he brings to the Chancellor for a brief moment.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, very effective.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the great thing about a lot of these supporting characters and why they ultimately juxtapose Sir Thomas More, because there is a lot of corruption happening here. People are doing whatever it takes to maintain their jobs, to keep the king happy, so that way they can live their lives or keep climbing the ranks, whatever their motives are. And Sir Thomas More, even as this prominent lawyer and significant figure within the royal ranking, he's maintaining his convictions. And again, I think that's why the grounded pragmatism is important here, because it immerses us even further into why he thinks the way he does. Even at times, if he comes off harsh, like when he's talking to I'm trying to think of the character's name, the character that is pursuing his daughter.
Roper, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. Who he's very much heavily against at one point because he doesn't abide to his own religious beliefs.
They conflict in terms of their religious beliefs. He is a Lutheran. Roper is a Lutheran.
Yeah.
Sir Thomas More is, of course, a Catholic. So they butt heads in that regard. And he talks very directly about how he's going to say no to the marriage.
Yeah.
And again, like, the performance and the way the film immerses us in the day-to-day, the way he reacts to the servants in his house, the way he reacts to other high-ranking officers and officials, like, there is a consistency to Sir Thomas More, and you do come to understand that while at times he is direct, he is a man of God who believes a certain like he has a strong conviction, and he's going to stick to that conviction no matter what. Even when the king himself arrives on his own front lawn, he says no to the king's face.
Yeah.
And there's something about that level of conviction. And ultimately, and I guess this is a spoiler, but it's also a true story. You can go read it up on Wikipedia. It's history. Those choices ultimately get him beheaded in the end. And that beheading comes at the behest of that corruption. Everything he did was within reason and within the law. He never stepped outside of the law, but because the king was whiny, needed to have his way, others then followed suit, and they did everything necessary to make sure that the king got his way. And that very much included stepping outside of the law. Yeah. And there's something about that at a very fundamental thematic level that is, holy good Lord, applicable to 2025.
Well,
like,
absolutely.
Holy crap.
Whether you look at, Yeah, it absolutely is. Whether you look at it through the lens of religion specifically, or even outside of that, there is a lot of parallel. There are a lot of parallels you can make between just government and religion and how it operates.
Well,
I mean, if
it's a lot of both, right? I mean,
it is.
because even in the United States, religion runs so much of the politics today.
There is a
So
through line.
much
You're
of the
absolutely right.
politics
And this
today.
is, in many ways, using history as a way of predating what was about to come. Because essentially what Thomas More is fighting against is that religious hypocrisy and those who follow the rules of religion, but not necessarily its teachings. And I think that's what's fascinating about the movie is that it's so hard for movies with these types of subject matters to be able to cater to two different audiences simultaneously without feeling like it's antagonizing a certain political or even religious belief. But this is a film that I think actually has a way of pleasing both Christians and anti-Christians simultaneously, by not being too specific on things, but really just still finding a way to support the church, but not its contradictions and the way it's manipulated and the way it's weaponized.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, because his Catholicism is what gives him grace and ultimately what saves him in the end, spiritually speaking, right? Like when he goes to be beheaded at the end of the film, there is a peace there. And he is very much come to terms that his death is coming at the hands of his own faith. And he knows that and has absolutely zero issues with that whatsoever, which is what's fascinating. So you're right. There is kind of, it is not anti-religion in that way. It's just commenting on the hypocrisy angle of it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that is a lot of the politics that we see today. And look, we live in 2025, so we're talking about how this is applicable to now. But ultimately, as long as religion has a stronghold on Capitol Hill, and for all accounts, I don't know if that will ever dissipate, certainly not in our lifetimes. But that is to say, that's why this film is so timeless, because it wouldn't have just been 2025 throughout the 1980s when religion took a stronghold on American politics in a huge way that was destructive. People of the 1980s would have revisited this film and they would have felt the same way. In the 2000s, same thing in the 2000s. If you revisited this film in 2003, I'm sure you would have felt a same level of conviction. And certainly in 2025, where things are now, you do feel it. So because this film is so intricately connected to religion and politics, and that's how the world is run.
Yeah. That's the way.
So sticking to that consciousness, that integrity, and whether that is driven, whether those morals are driven by religion or not, that idea of doing what's right, no matter the personal consequence, and standing up to power and corruption and compromise, that will always be a major talking point. And I love how the film handles that here. It sounds a lot more schmaltzy when you say it out loud the way that I am.
It's actually not.
But
This
I think
is a
in the film it's
movie.
not that at all. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, there's some great writing here too, courtesy of Robert Bolton. A lot of this writing probably also stems from the stage play itself, but the way that this governmental / religious overseeing body essentially creates these loopholes to chastise Thomas More, there is a timeliness to that. It's the fact that his silence then gets twisted as a form of denial. So that's how they're able to judge him so harshly. This specific act, this specific oath that he refuses to acknowledge, basically claims that the king's marriage to Catherine and how she was his brother's widow, that's how they deem it as quote unquote unlawful. So now he's able to remarry to Anne Boleyn. And it's really just because they wanted him to have the ability to father a son. That's the only reason why they twisted these words. And that's a corrupt version of a loophole. That's basically what they do here. And some of the writing here, in order to emphasize that, I think is quite powerful. Probably my favorite line in the movie. And I think this is sort of the go-to line from the movie for many people is Thomas More's analogy of the earth being flat versus round. Saying something like, if the earth is flat, will the king's command say it's round? Or if the earth is round, will the king's command flatten it? It's essentially the ethos of this whole movie, but I think that's pretty good writing.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. I love that moment as well. And again, he says that without stating any sort of opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not saying the earth is round or flat. I'm just saying that if this is how it's claimed to be, the King's Court is going to do the complete
They'll make it so. Yeah.
In order to get around whatever loophole they need. And if that's not the story of humanity, I don't know what is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is ultimately how power and corruption works. And I think that is what's so fascinating to your point about his silence, is that it is completely loaded. And this is what I love often about subtlety, even though Schofield's performance isn't wholly subtle, but when it is, I do think it is quite powerful, because the silence of him here, particularly in the back half of the movie, it is not a sign of guilt. It is not a sign of weakness, but rather one of wisdom and lawfulness. His silence is, of course, his version of resistance, but he's doing it in a way to protect himself, because he was able to do it while being within the confines of the law.
Yeah.
And he is someone that is very conscious of words, and how words are articulated is very important. Like, there's that whole moment when he's, again, going back to the level of detail in the film, there comes that moment later on when he has to go down to the dock and he calls over the boatmen and they refuse him because of the politics and the heat coming down on him. So he has to walk home. And the film shows us that he is walking home, and it's cold at night and it's windy. And eventually he gets there, and his daughter informs him that there's this new oath. There's a new oath of supremacy. And if you don't take the oath, that is then labeled as treason.
Yeah.
But he's like, what is the wording? I need to know the wording, because the way it's worded is going to be very important in terms of how I approach this.
It's how contracts get you these days too. It's
exactly. So like, I love how his worldview is through his faith, but the way he physically acts in the world is very strategic, and it comes through his education and his occupation of being a lawyer. Like, how all of that fuses in the Schofield's performance and the writing of the character
he's very clever. He's one step ahead of everything that's happening, and that's why he gets condemned for it. I love the scene that he has with Thomas Howard, the Duke of Norfolk specifically, and how they basically have to fake an argument and ending their friendship just for his own safety.
That was really good.
A little more obvious, but like that's a great example of how cryptic and intelligent that Thomas More is. And I do love Paul Schofield's performance here. Apparently he wasn't even in attendance at the ceremony, because he didn't think he was going to win. He thought Richard Burton was going to win for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, but no, Schofield ended up winning the award anyway.
Could you imagine if that happened today? Like, everyone just goes to the Oscars today.
I know,
everyone
goes. You
have racist tweets on Twitter, and then people are like, well, maybe don't come. And even in that case,
you still go
everyone
anyway.
was still there. But yeah, I can't fathom that today. Like, that just wasn't the Oscars history for a long time. Like, everyone goes now, but could you imagine if, I don't know, whoever, I'm trying to think of someone nominated for Best Actor, like, just didn't show up because Adrian Brody's going to win. Like,
what if Cillian Murphy didn't show up? Because everyone thought Paul Giamatti was going to win or something like that.
Well, it would be kind of the opposite. I feel like it felt like Cillian was on his way to win, but like
so
Paul
then
Giamatti
Paul
decided
Giamatti
to go
doesn't
to
show up. Yeah,
he just went to In-N-Out Burger because he's like, I'm not going to win.
I'm good.
Screw it. Like, that's wild. If that, so funny. Yeah. This movie, he's really great here, though.
This movie won 6 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Actor, Director, and of course, cinematography, costume design, and writing for Robert Bolt. Was also nominated for Best Supporting Actor. Robert Shaw, I think that's a very fair nomination as well. Wendy Hiller was nominated for Best Supporting Actress, which I was a little bit surprised by. She has one great moment towards the end, her final scene with Thomas More. I think that's what gave her the nomination, but. I feel like consistently Susanna York actually has more of a powerful female presence in the movie as Thomas More's daughter. Interestingly, this is her second film in the 60s that won Best Picture, because she was also in Tom Jones a few years ago. But yeah, I thought Wendy's nomination here, and she was also the one that accepted Schofield's award on his behalf because he wasn't there. I could see why she got nominated because of that one great final moment, but I thought Susanna's work consistently was also very powerful, if not more powerful.
Yeah, Susanna York is also really, really good here as well. Sometimes it just takes a scene to get nominated, and ultimately that is Robert Shaw is not in this film all that much.
No, but he does something in that one scene, and maybe it's also because of how the narrative incorporates that performance into the actual story that ends up happening. You feel his powerful presence at every turn. It's almost kind of like the Mahershala Ali thing with Moonlight. Even when he's not in the movie, you could feel his overarching presence, like this ghost lingering throughout the movie. And in the case of this movie with King Henry, it's not necessarily a ghost lingering throughout the movie, but it's this powerful, overlooking presence that's there as a threat that's always looking out at you.
Yeah.
Like, you feel that.
Oh, it's a great, I totally agree. Like, what he does in his one moment is extremely powerful. So I don't disagree, but that is to say, sometimes that's all it takes is one moment and you're in, and it's really great. And I don't know the year on the whole all that much to know if it was deserving or not, but as far as this film is concerned, that performance and that sequence is crucial.
Yeah.
Absolutely vital. And one of the best scenes of the film for sure. It's also interesting too, total coincidence, but last week I also watched The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 for the first time.
Oh,
and
nice.
Robert Shaw is also in that film. You want to talk about two completely different performances. Like, those two have nothing in common. I was like, man, live in 1 week, I get to see the range of Robert Shaw. Of course, we all know the range of Robert Shaw, but
we all do.
It was just funny how that worked out.
And given how much you and I are big fans of From Russia with Love, we both think that's the best Sean Connery Bond film. He is great in that movie. Kind of introduced as just the henchman, but then makes it known that he is perhaps one of the best adversaries for James Bond, at least of that early era. Really versatile actor, one that we certainly lost too soon, because I think he only passed away at the age of 51, 1 year after Jaws came out. We definitely lost him.
And obviously he's great in Jaws, and that's probably where most people most know him from. But he's great in Jaws, but everything leading that, he's fantastic. And From Russia with Love, I completely forgot he was in that. But yeah, there's a lot of great points there. Yeah, great actor. Love Robert Shaw, and he's really, really good in this film in his one little moment.
John Hurt.
Orson Welles. Orson Welles. I know we talked about him briefly earlier, but I love Orson Welles. He's one of my goats. Absolutely love Orson Welles.
He makes an impact here for sure.
Oh my gosh, big time, yeah. He's fan-freaking-tastic in this film.
So does John Hurt. We mentioned him earlier that this is his first major film. He really does stick out. And I was actually watching a portion of this movie with my wife, and I said, "Hey, babe, do you know who that is?" And she's like, "No, but he looks familiar." And then I mentioned Mr. Ollivander from Harry Potter. And she goes, "Oh!" So she's a big Harry Potter fan. So that was her connection to John Hurt.
Yeah, that's same thing with Brandy. Anytime I bring up an actor, she just goes, "What else is he in?" And then I have to list off, and she has to try to find whatever her connection is.
It's amazing. But he's really good here too. How about a brief glimpse of Vanessa Redgrave as Anne Boleyn?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, that's Vanessa Redgrave. It's to the point now that we have to call it a cameo, even though it wasn't really much of a cameo at that time. And apparently she said because of her limited role, she didn't even want to get paid for this movie, just given how limited that it was.
You know what? I did read that actually, now that you say that. Yeah.
Okay.
I did see that trivia on there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of the people who are acting in this movie took some massive pay cuts just to make sure it stayed within its budget. A lot of people seem to be really passionate about this story at the time.
Yeah, this was the brutalist of its day.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, everyone took a pay cut. It was made for $2 million, which I don't know what that translates to. Maybe it is Brady Corbet's 10 million. I don't know. Wouldn't that be funny?
I'm kind of curious about this. I'm gonna pull up an inflation calculator right now.
Wouldn't that be funny?
All right, CPI inflation calculator. Let's see. Okay, this was
2 million.
Okay, 1966. I'm going to do that, and then so 2 million. That equates to about 20 million nowadays.
Okay, 20 million by today's standards. So a little bit more than The Brutalist, but still, made everyone kind of took their cut. Yeah, to make this movie and for it to pay off the way that it did.
But it just goes to show the level of conviction and passion that not just the filmmakers and the studios have for this movie, but even the actors. They wanted to make sure that it got made in the way that it was. And I guess, I don't recall when Robert Bolt's play first premiered. Maybe it was very famous and top of mind at the time, and they wanted to make sure it was as faithful and connected to that play as possible. Maybe that had something to do with it as well. But to see everyone rally behind making this movie the way that it was is just kind of a neat thing to see.
Yeah, no, taking stage to screen adaptations was the 1960s version of animation live action remakes.
Yeah.
It happened a lot. Right?
Yeah.
So, and obviously a few of them we've talked about in this series that won Best Picture. So it was clearly a popular thing to do.
Yeah.
And A Man for All Seasons, I think, is one of those great ones. I think this is maybe an underrated Best Picture winner. I don't think it's going to end up in a top 10 or 15 for me as far as Best Picture winners of all time. But if we're just talking about underrated Best Pictures, a film that people don't really talk about all that much, then it is going to be up there on that list. Because it isn't talked about all that much, but it is a film that is timeless for all the reasons we mentioned. I love the filmmaking here. I love the grounded day-to-day inclusions and how immersive that is. And I think this is a really good movie. Really good movie.
Yeah. So of the movies nominated this year for Best Picture, the only one that I'd seen before is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And I will say, I do think I like that movie more than this one, but I think this movie is a better Best Picture winner, just given the context of it, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
I think it's a more fascinating one. Like I said, not my favorite of the movies that won Best Picture in the 1960s. I would certainly take this over My Fair Lady and even Tom Jones, but we're also dealing with some all-timers with movies like Lawrence of Arabia and The Sound of Music. Anything that has to compete with those movies is going to come up short. So the fact that we're dealing with a movie like this, that's essentially like a 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd for me, that's pretty darn good.
I mean, when it's all said and done, this might rank like 6th or 7th on the list for this decade. And that's not a slight against this film at all.
This is a good decade.
I think it's
the Academy got it mostly right for most of these.
Yeah, look, I am perfectly happy with this. From year to year, and we talk about this all the time, it is very rare that my personal favorite film of the year wins Best Picture. It happened with Oppenheimer, and I don't even know. I guess you can include Parasite, although Parasite was like 2, I think, for me. It
was top 5, so still pretty close.
Yeah, it's still pretty close. But it's very rare that there's a crossover in that regard.
Sure.
If I was around in 1966, would this have been my favorite film of the year? Probably not. But it's a winner that you're still very happy with. And that's ultimately how, at least that's how I anyway, manage the Oscars every single year. It's not a matter of whether I would have picked it to win Best Picture. Most of the time, I would not have picked that film to win Best Picture.
Yeah.
I would not have picked Anora personally to win Best Picture. Am I happy and thrilled for Sean Baker? Absolutely. So it's a very similar thing. I loved Anora. I thought it was great. I've been a Sean Baker fan for a long time, and to see him get his win and get his notoriety, I am all for it. I liked it a lot. And I would feel the same way about 1966. Really good movie. I can live with that, especially when the Academy can get it very, very, very wrong, some of the time.
Well, I'm curious to see if they get any of these other ones wrong. I've seen Midnight Cowboy before from 1969. I haven't seen Oliver from 1968. I In the Heat of the Night, which will be the next film in this series, that may be one that I think I've seen, but I don't recall. I have to give it a rewatch, kind of like with My Fair Lady. I thought I'd seen that before, and then when I started rewatching it, I was like, none of this seems familiar to me. Maybe this is a first time watch.
And
so
look,
yeah, we'll see.
In the Heat of the Night could also be another great example, because with 1967, I can tell you right off the bat, it's at best 3 on the list. At best, it's 3 on the list. There are 2 films, just of the 5 nominated, let alone any other film that came out in 1967.
Mm-hmm.
And The Heat of the Night would not have won Best Picture for me. Is it one of those films that, despite it winning and it wouldn't have been the film that I voted for, is it something that I can still be happy with? We'll talk about that next week, and that very well could be the case.
Yeah.
And I think that is the disappointment of something like My Fair Lady, for example. Because obviously we were always going to champion Mary Poppins and Dr. Strangelove over that film. Mm-hmm. The disappointment with My Fair Lady is that it doesn't even come close to those two. Like, not even on the same stratosphere, not on the same planet or galaxy. And that can happen. And that's where the disparity gets to be a little frustrating.
Sure.
When it's something like, A Man for All Seasons and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Yeah, I agree with you. I probably would prefer Virginia Woolf over this film, but most of the time my favorite film doesn't win. But this is one I can be happy with.
I'm just happy that the film that did, just happy that the film that did win is still not just a good one, but a relevant one.
Yeah, and one that still holds up very well.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
good movie.
There are films that have won Best Picture that might be good, but do they hold up over time? Which can be 2 different things.
A lot of times they're just reflections of that particular time.
Yes.
AKA Crash.
Exactly. Gone with the Wind is another one.
Very much, yeah.
All right. Anyway, with all of that said, if you agree or disagree with anything we had to say here, you can leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can always email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. This was a fun conversation. I really enjoyed talking about this movie a lot. And
agreed.
Just goes to prove further that the 60s, at least through 1966, man, great stuff.
The Academy actually had taste.
Yeah. And if, in The Heat of the Night, we'll see about Oliver, I don't know. Midnight Cowboy, like 2 of those 3, like In the Heat of the Night and Midnight Cowboy, I've always liked to love to some degree or another. We'll see how much, I haven't seen them in a long time. So we'll see how they hold up.
Yeah.
But if at the end of it, this decade is 7 for 10, as far as like very good to great to all time, I think this is a hell of a
good
decade.
track.
Good
track
record.
Good decade. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I am very much looking forward to these last 3, though, for sure. All right. With that, we will wind down for this week. We do have 2 reviews coming this week. Yeah. What are we talking about, Brendan? We have the
hell of a summer.
Film,
it's not summer yet.
Summer.
But we've got a hell of a summer to talk about.
And look, Brendan, I'm just going to get it out of the way here, although I'm sure I'll bring it up again. Who am I kidding? When we get to that review, I can't shake it. When it comes to Joaquin Phoenix Jr., I can't shake it.
Hector is. It's all you're gonna say. It's his twin. I still don't quite see it, but I'm starting to see a lot of other people say the same thing. You're apparently not alone in this. I'm starting to see other people say this.
It's there. It is so there for me, and I wish that you were there last night when I was watching this movie, because I was laughing to myself all the way through, because half of what he does in the movie, I'm like, that is just a miniature Joaquin Phoenix. That's all that I see here. And I say that as a huge compliment, by the way.
So ultimately, he saved the movie for you, is what you're saying.
Perhaps. I am falling in love with him as all. I think he's a really good young actor.
We'll talk about it more, but I'll just simply say I loved him in that movie. I really did.
yeah, regardless of the project, I feel like he's been really good in all the films that I've seen him in. And I'm very eager to see where his career takes him.
Yeah.
And the moment he is cast in the same movie as Joaquin Phoenix, my mind is going to explode. So I won't be able to handle that.
Of course, I'll play with expectation and not make them the same character or something like that.
They should play a father and son. They should. They are the same person. I'm telling you, they are. That's all I see.
I love hearing JD's Joaquin Fred obsession. I love it.
Yeah, he's the best. At any rate, we will be talking about that film, and we are also going to be talking about the anthology comedy action film Friggy Tales, which I am very anxious to get into as well. So we will have reviews for both of those, and there will be a new Women in Session at the end of the week, which will feature me.
How about that?
I joined Women in Session, and we had a fun little conversation about my time starting InSession Film and becoming a critic. It was a great conversation.
Good stuff, man.
So you can be on the lookout for that on Friday. All right. I think that's it. Brendan, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I guess we'll have to make this brief, but sadly, let's just acknowledge the unfortunate passing of Val Kilmer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to talk about him on this particular episode. Would have been nice to dedicate a full segment to him, especially for those of us at our age. We grew up with a lot of films that he either co-starred or even starred in. For me, it was Batman Forever. That was like, for a while, he was my Batman until I started seeing other iterations of it. But for a lot of other people, it was Top Gun. For a lot of other people, it was also acknowledging his comedic stylings in a movie like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Oh, yeah.
One of the most versatile actors. Probably should have been nominated for an Oscar for movies like Heat and Tombstone at the very least. He will sorely be missed. One of the most powerful magnetic presences to ever grace the screen. Yeah,
I mean, I had various phases with Val Kilmer, right? When I was growing up, he was first Iceman. That's how I knew and loved Val Kilmer. And then soon after, he was Bruce Wayne and became Batman. And that's a film that I have really come to champion over the last few years, especially. Like, I love Batman.
I kind of like that movie. Yeah, I kind of dig it.
Yeah, I think it's really great. So, yeah, as a kid, it was always Top Gun and Batman. And then you get to high school, and I started to become more of the cinephile that I am now. And that's when you catch up with films like Tombstone and The Doors and Heat, of course, Michael Mann's Heat. And you love him in those roles. And then even as, time goes on, that's when you get to the Kiss Kiss Bang Bangs and those kinds of roles as well.
Absolutely.
Great actor, legend, one of a kind. No one did it like Val Kilmer. His line delivery is maybe my favorite thing about him. Like, he always nailed the line, regardless of tone, whatever it was.
That's what made his comedic timing so great. In a movie like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, just hearing him say, "Who taught you math?" is one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
Yeah, I know. It's so good. Love him. We'll deeply miss him for sure. He was definitely one of the best. No doubt about it.
Absolutely.
Definitely thoughts to his friends and family and everyone affected by his passing. Loved Val Kilmer. All right. With all of that said, we will get out of here for this week. Stay tuned. We got for the 2 reviews, Women in Session later on in the week. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Man for all seasons. Cast Orson Welles. That's the secret there.
Good movie.